Well, good morning. Balcony, how are we? All right. I'm not talking to you again. That's fine. If you have your Bibles, Luke chapter 9. That's where we're going to be today. If you got a physical one, if you got your phones with you, if you don't have one, there should be a hardback black one right in front of you on the seats. We're covering a lot of ground today. It's really helpful to see all the context. Let me explain. For this whole year, we've been going through the whole Bible in a year. We've been cramming it in. We're in the New Testament now, and so we're looking at the four Gospels in this series called Jesus. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Terry kicked it off looking at the kingdom of Jesus, Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. Last week was Mark, looking at the miracles of Jesus. This week, we're in the Gospel of Luke, looking at the mission of Jesus. What was the mission of Jesus? Which really asks two questions. Who was he and what was he doing? And so we're going to be looking at that today in the Gospel of Luke, specifically chapter 9. To give a little bit of context of what's happening here, this is really where, if you look at the storyline of the ministry of Jesus, things are getting darker. Things are getting darker and worse, and we're going to see a brief moment of light before things get darkest as well. Jesus and his disciples are in this town city called Caesarea Philippi. It's probably the northernmost point we know that he traveled to, and it's also maybe the most multicultural, pluralistic, and polytheistic city that he had been to. This place had several names. People called it different things. One of the names for it was based off of the god Pan, and this was kind of the hub of his worship. Also, the Canaanite god Baal, we've talked about him a lot. And people would also name this place after different political figures. Caesar, meaning son of God. So there's many people here worshiping different things, different ideas of what does it mean to be human, what is the purpose of life. And Jesus asks his disciples in this place, who do people say I am? You could imagine going down to Yonge and Dundas and asking people, who is Jesus? And you might hear different things. He was a good guy, he was a teacher, he was a revolutionary, he was a prophet. The disciples tell Jesus, some people think that you are the second Elijah, and he asks them, who do you say I am? Peter, always the first to speak up, says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. And for once, he gets it right. Jesus says, yes. And then he explains what that is going to mean. And so in Luke 9:21, Jesus is going to give a bit of his mission statement here. And he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, that he is the Messiah, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and on the third day be raised. I must do this. I must go into Jerusalem. I must be betrayed and I'm going to die. And then he explains the implications. If you want to follow him, if you want to walk after the suffering servant, Verse 23, and he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? You want to follow me, then you're going to let go to these other things for life and sustenance and protection, because they're actually going to cause you to lose your life. But if you give everything up for me, you've gained everything and lost nothing. And then he gives a very strange promise, and it's really the hinge, the linchpin between this and what we're about to see next in verse 27. But I tell you truly here, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James and went up the mountain to pray. He said, there's some among you who are going to see the kingdom, the glory of God. And then there's a very unique time marker. You don't see these a lot in the Gospels. It says, and right after these things, 8 days, he took them up to the mountain to pray. So Luke wants you to hold these things in mind. What he said of who he is and what he must do, and what's about to happen on the mountain. Because if you've been following us for the last couple months as we walk through the Bible together, you know that these really important biblical events, a lot take place on mountains. You think of Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah, where God provides the substitute for his son. And he says to them, God himself will provide the sacrifice. You think of Moses going up on Mount Sinai. He receives the law, and God's presence descends on the place in a cloud and speaks with him. Elijah on Mount Carmel, after the defeat of the prophet of Baal, goes up on the mountain. God descends on it. Jesus goes up to a desolate mountain when he's tempted. He goes on a smaller mountain for the Sermon on the Mount. And once again, he's going up on a mountain with Peter, James, and John. This is where we get to the focus of our time today. We're looking at the man, the person of Jesus himself. So let's look at verses 29 to 35. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and two men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah, not knowing what he had said. And as he was saying these things, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. This is one of the most mysterious passages in the Bible. There's nothing like it anywhere in any other form of literature, ancient or modern. What's happening here? Well, remember, when God was leading Israel through the desert, when he brought them out of Egypt, his presence stayed with them in the form of a cloud, a glory cloud. During the day, it was very, very bright, and at night it was fiery, and it led them through the desert. It descended upon the mountain, Mount Sinai. Anyone who touched the mountain, anything, died. Now we have something here happening on this mountain, which seems to parallel this. We have a mountain, we have Moses, we have Elijah, and we have God speaking. And we have the glory cloud again. But there's one significant change. If you look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all describe it similarly, but the different wording actually brings out some of the differences. It says that the face of Jesus began to shine, so that his clothes became this brilliant white, unsurpassingly great in its brightness. So in this case now, the light isn't coming from a cloud. The glory of God is emanating from Jesus. It's not reflecting off something. When Moses came down the mountain, his face was shining, reflecting what he had seen, like the moon reflects the sun. This wasn't a reflection. It was coming from Christ himself. Here's what's different about this. In this case, on this mountain, Jesus himself is the glory cloud. Jesus is the glory cloud. This is showing what Hebrews 1 describes, that he is the radiance of God's glory, that he is the exact representation of his being. Jesus is the perfect articulation of the Father. In John 17, when Jesus is doing his priestly prayer, he says, I want them to be with me so they can see my glory. There is no better expression and articulation of the glory of God than in the person of Jesus here. This scene is usually called the Transfiguration. It comes from the word for metamorphosis. That's really when something transforms. But Jesus is not becoming something here that he had not been already. This isn't something new that he transforms into prior to the 3 years. This is who he is. And he's lifting the veil. He's peeling back the curtain. He's showing the disciples more of what they had previously seen. Which raises a question, why? Why would you do this now? Why wouldn't you kick off your ministry like this? Why wouldn't he do this after the resurrection? Why would he do it at this point? Well, kind of the church tradition, you look at the church fathers, the disciples of the disciples, the patristics, the agreement is all that Jesus is doing this to encourage them, because he told them the Son of Man must die. He must suffer many things. And he shows them his glory. And Moses and Elijah are there. That's the prophets and the law. Moses represents the law. Elijah is the prophets. And God says, this is my son. And he's trying to encourage them and tell them, look, when they come for me, I will be in control. When they take me and mock me and beat me and ridicule me and spit on me and give me the death of a slave and not a citizen, this is part of the plan. I am allowing this to happen. This is what must take place. And I'm going to show you more of my glory. I'm going to prove to you that this is all part of this plan here. That he is not just another failed Messiah. He's not someone who claims to be the way and isn't. He's not just another prophet pointing to God. He's saying, no, this is me. This is who I am. I'm not another person pointing just to the glory of God. I am the manifestation, the Word become flesh. Which answers part one of our question. What's the mission of Jesus? Well, who is Jesus? He is the God and the Messiah whom Moses and Elijah point to. That's the first part. So now we can get to the second part now, which is looking at the mission itself. Why did Jesus come? Well, how do you get the mission from this? How do you see the purpose wrapped up here? Well, remember again that in the Old Testament, anytime people came in contact with the glory of God, they died. We modern audiences, we don't like that. That seems excessive. That seems unreasonable. That's a little bit over the top. But let me prove to you this is not. I'll give you a couple examples from our own life. If a moose falls on you, you die. No one disagrees? All right. If you're driving and you hit a moose and the moose falls through your windshield, you die. That's it. You may not like it. That doesn't change moose physics. The being of the moose is too much for you to bear. If you stare at the sun, what happens? Well, if you stare too long, it can damage your eyes. The luminosity is too much for your retinas. It's too much for you to bear. Have you ever come into contact with someone who is so intelligent and so smart that you knew you will never, ever be as smart as this? And you thought you were a smart person. And you come into contact with them and you think, I will never be this brilliant. And it's this kind of this unraveling, this death of part of your identity, because I know I can never measure up to this, and this is who I thought I was. It's simply too much. I will never be this way. And on a spiritual level, you see this in the Bible. When Isaiah starts to come into the presence of God, in Isaiah chapter 6, he says, woe is me, I am undone. And he's a prophet, he's a holy man. And he comes into the presence of God and says, I am a man of unclean lips. And Job, when he's approaching the whirlwind, he says, I've heard of you with my ears, but now I see you with my eyes, and I despise myself, and I repent in sackcloth and ashes. They drop. They see it. It's too much for them. I told this story a while back. Years ago, I was in a very sketchy zoo. And I wanted to check out the big cats, the wild cats. That's my zoo animal of choice. And so there were several tigers in this big space, and it was rebar, basically for the first 2.5 feet, just these metal bars, and then it was some glass on top, and you could get as close as you wanted. There was no little barrier holding you back. You get as close to that putty cat as you want. So I was standing there watching the tigers. I love it. And this lady comes up beside me, and it's a hot day, and she opens up an umbrella, like a sunbrella, a parasol, whatever it is. Opens it up, tiger sees it, does not like that. And in a split second, runs straight at us, pounces, and pounds the glass. This whole thing took like 2 Mississippis. And in that moment, I did not square up. I did not reach for my gun or my sword, nothing. I didn't even save the lady. So you're on your own. You did this. Okay, no. What happened? I dropped. At a precognitive level, I knew I am done. That would have been the last thing I ever saw, was that tiger pouncing at me. It is too great for me. So that's on a physical level. And maybe I've persuaded you a little bit. Okay, if a moose falls on me, I'll die. And maybe God is so great. But there's a moral component to this. There's a moral component of coming into God's presence because he is holy and we are not. And I don't think we're fully attuned with our hearts this much to be aware of it because we're so isolated from ourselves and from community because of the screens we carry with us. But consider the following. If we could put on the screen behind me the last week of your life, every action, every thought, every click, every swipe, there wouldn't be a single person in this room that wouldn't be terribly ashamed. Okay? And that's in a room full of sinners. Now imagine being in the presence of a holy God, your whole life, your whole being, vulnerable to him. That's the undoing they speak of. And yet we were made to be with him. We were made to walk with him and know him and be known by him and delight in him. But I'm broken and sinful. So his presence, his glory, it's not delightful, it's damning. And so that's why the tabernacle was made. So God could dwell with his people safely. And so the tabernacle was this tent. Later it was a temple. And inside that was a smaller tent. That was the Holy of Holies. And there was a veil there. And that's where God dwelt. Okay. Now, what happens here? On the mountain, there's Elijah, there's Moses and Jesus. The disciples come too, and Peter says this, "Hey guys, can I make some tents for you?" That's the word tabernacle. He says, "Hey, I think I'm going to make something because this is too much. I need to be protected from this." He wasn't worried about them catching a cold. He said, "I'm going to make some tabernacles here. This is a little bit too much." And as he's saying that, perhaps his worst fear imaginable happens. The glory cloud becomes closer and it envelops them. And that's the thing that you would die. Moses said, "Can I see your glory?" God said, "No, it's going to kill you." And this glory comes, it overshadows them. They drop to the ground, expecting to be dead. They hear God speak, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." He's quoting Isaiah 2 up to 53, the story of the suffering servant. The problem is our being can't bear his being. We're limited in our access to this. They drop to the ground. They hear this, and then they look up, and it's just Jesus. It's just Jesus with them. And this is the importance of the death of Christ, because all the gospel authors, they emphasize this, that when Jesus dies, something happened to the veil, to the curtain that separated God's presence from ours. Really at the climax of Luke, he says this in Luke 23. I'll read it for you. "It was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed." Interesting choice of words. "And the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, says, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' And having said that, he breathed his last." In the Gospel of Matthew, it emphasizes it very clearly that the veil was torn from the top to the bottom. So Jesus dies, and the barrier between God's presence and ours is ripped in two. And this is why there's this emphasis now that because of the person and work of Jesus Christ, God's Spirit can now dwell with us, and we can be living temples of him. That now we can have this access to God, this relationship, this proximity with him because of the person and work of Jesus. That now his benefits, his glory, his right standing with God is imputed to us because he took our shame, he took our sin, he took all of this, the separation that we deserved, the isolation, he took it so that we can be reconciled to him. That is one of many things that we see here. This is all that the law and prophets had been anticipating and pointing to. And God says, this is my son. This is what he must do. And Elijah and Moses, they come and they say to him, you are right. You are right when you say you must suffer many things. And they spoke with him about his exodus that he was about to lead. That's the word they use there. Moses led the exodus of God's people out of their captivity so they could be free to worship him. And Jesus now is leading all of God's people, all of creation, out of this captivity and brokenness and bondage to sin so they can be reconciled with him once again. And this is the greater exodus that Elijah pointed to himself. So far we've seen the man, the Christ, who claims to be the Messiah. And we've seen this mission to redeem all things back to God, to life with him. And he's going to die. He's going to take the place. And we see God himself saying, this is my son. Listen to him. Listen to him when he says he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except for him. Listen to him when he says, fear not, little flock, for it is the Father's joy to give you the kingdom. Listen to him when he says that you are to turn the other cheek and love your enemies. Listen to him when he says that it is better to give than to receive. Listen to him when he says, when you feed or give water to one of these, you are doing this to him. Listen to him when he says that he will build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail. Listen to him. And this brings us to the next part then, the Christian life, our response to all of this. Because you're really presented with a decision here, an injunction. Jesus says, this is who I am, and this is why I've come. There's a decision, there's a response on our part. N.T. Wright, he puts it the best I've ever seen. He says this, how can you live with the terrifying thought that the hurricane has become human, that the fire has become flesh, that life itself became life and walked in our midst? Christianity either means that or it means nothing. It is either the most devastating disclosure of the deepest reality of the world, or it is a sham, a nonsense, a bit of deceitful play acting. Most of us, unable to cope with saying either of those things, condemn ourselves to live in the shallow world in between. But Jesus says he is the Christ. He must, maybe put that quote back up. That was a mouthful. Let them chew on it a little bit more. Thanks, Monica. Jesus says, I am the Christ. I have come to die. And if you want to follow me and follow in my footsteps, it is this pattern of self-giving love for the life of the world, which is either all or nothing. And I love in Matthew 17, when this author is describing the transfiguration, he includes this description, which isn't in Luke at the end. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, rise and have no fear. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. They look back up and it's just Jesus. And now they have a greater understanding of who he is, the magnitude of why he's come. And he leads them back down the mountain into the brokenness of the world where he's going to be led to the cross. The transfiguration, it's really in many ways, it's a preview of the resurrection, of the glory of the resurrected Messiah, that he will be betrayed, crucified, humiliated, lifted up, and when he does so, he will call all people back unto himself. And he's showing them his glory, because his glory becomes their hope. I've seen this, so I can trust him. And for us today, his glory becomes our hope. His glory becomes our promise. He's calling us to trust him, to listen to him, to have no fear. And trust is really a combination of two things. Trust is a combination of love and obedience. If I trust you, I'm going to believe that you are worthy of my trust, that you do love me, that you have good plans and purposes for me, and I'm going to act on it. That's what faith is. It's active trust, worthy of his faith. And so God here is calling us to trust him today. He's calling them to trust him. And to encourage them, he shows them more of his glory. So this is one of the reasons why we have corporate worship, why we gather together. We come and we ask the worship team to lead us into the presence of God. Set the table, prepare a feast. I want to see more of him. I want to know more of him. I want to taste that the Lord is good. I want to see that the Lord is good. Prepare the banquet. Lead us into the presence that we may worship our God. And when you present the word to us, you better preach the full counsel of God. Don't you dare hold back. You tell me the good news of who I was, of who Jesus is, and who I now am. I need to see more of this. I need to be reminded of the gospel, because I know it, but I'm so quick to forget, because all these other things in my life, they feel more real than the goodness of God and the persons of Christ and the indwelling and power of his Spirit. So I come not only to hear things, but I need to get it in my bones. I want to see this. Would you show me more of this? And so this is why we come. This is why we ask. And actually, God delights to do this. If you remember last week, we invited people to come forward for prayer. If you want God to act in your life, if you want him to move, if you need healing, if there's someone in your life you need him to speak to or work with, come forward for prayer. And so we had, second service, lineups, up the aisles and out the door. And our prayer team comes forward and they read off things that God has been putting on their heart. If you have pain in your left ankle, come forward. If you've been having migraines, come forward. If you're dealing with this, come forward. And people come forward and they say, yes, that's me. Why does God do that? He wants to remind you that he sees you. He sees you. The invitation is to come, to let him move. 5:45 this morning, my little girl Lucy, she's in the corner, just whimpering. What's the matter, baby? She looks over. Come here, baby, can I help you? And she comes over and she wants the cow to sit on top of the horse. And I say, just come, let me help you. I want to help you. This is a small thing, but I'll do it because I love you. And so we come forward, and part of my pleasure of serving you is to get to pray with you at the front. And the fear and the brokenness and the burdens in this place, it's overwhelming. We're all walking around with fears in our life that we're not enough, that we've done too much, that this thing, I can't solve it. Maybe I fear that God won't do anything. And so we come and we cry out and we ask him to reveal himself, to act in our lives, to demonstrate his power and the glory of his Son. This is why we come, and he delights to do it. And so this is the invitation today for all of us once again. We come and we ask to see more of Jesus, because we have fears, because we have brokenness, because we have doubts. And so I want to see more of him. I want to savor this once again. So I come and I trust him, which is love and obedience, because you don't negotiate with the hurricane. You don't negotiate with the tiger. You respond accordingly. So I come and I say, you've saved me. Command me. What would you have me do? The promise is that you'll be with me, so it's worth it, because I know you love me. So I'm going to trust. I don't think this makes any sense, but you've said it, and I've tried everything else, so I'm going to walk with you. And there's many of us here today who don't know Jesus. I'm glad you're here. Would you see the one who came for you while we were far away from him? Eternity entered time. Divinity became humanity to seek and save the lost. Do you feel messed up? Great, you're in the right place. This is just a room full of beggars pointing to where we found bread. That's it. Would you see the one who loves you and has come for you? He died for you. He must do this. He knew the price that would be paid, and he gladly did it out of love. So that's why we obey and follow and trust. Would you pray with me? Let's just take a minute and listen. Be still in his presence. Father, would you reveal to us today more of the glory of your Son? Show us the one who came for us, who died for us, and who rose, defeating all of our enemies, freeing us from ourselves. Father, I pray for those today who believe, but say, help my unbelief. Those who wrestle with uncertainty and doubt and fear. Would you remind them of your love for them, independent of anything we do? Would we rejoice today that our name is written in heaven before anything else? For those who don't know you, Father, move in this place. We proclaim that you have said you will draw all people unto yourselves. Father, do it here today. We pray for a greater manifestation of your Son. Would you show us more of his glory? Would we leave this place with faces like Moses reflecting the glory of your Son as we go out into an anxious, broken, and dying world, bringing the new life of grace and hope and the resurrection. We thank you for this and ask all this for the glory of your Son. Amen. Church, would you stand as we respond in worship together?